Right, so trade union elections, they rarely make much news, do they? But they should. This is a democratically decided public body. They should matter just as much as any political party and any general or local elections do, frankly, especially to anybody actually a member of any given trade union. It matters who runs things. It matters how the structures are operated and decided. And it's important they are as openly democratic as possible. Look at the Labour Party, frankly, as an example of what happens if you don't. When you see a given faction functionally take over, dishonestly as they did, they stop functioning as an entity operating in the interests of their members, though, and in their case, in the interest of the country, instead operating only in their own self-serving interests. Thus far as Labour goes, things have very much gone as Keir Starmer wants, his faction want, though electability as a result is still open to question. But in the same factional attempts to seize power have been going on within Unite the Union behind the scenes by their General Secretary Sharon Graham and her acolytes, and their attempts to take over the operation of the internal structures, the National Executive Committee, in a very similar way to Keir Starmer and the Labour National Executive. But they've just failed. Their elections haven't quite gone Sharon's way. And that can only be for the good, ultimately, of the union and its members itself, because leaders need to be held to account. They need to be challenged. It's no good them being surrounded by bowing and scraping loyalists. Indeed, it can be said that just like Keir Starmer, Sharon Graham was ostensibly presented as having been of the left herself to start with. She was certainly regarded as such in the last General Secretary elections. She was the only candidate of the four standing, then three, described as a right-winger was Gerard Coyne. Sharon was seen as off the left, and that was despite her having quoted Thatcher at one point in relation to being asked if she would pull out of the race. But her actions since, again, like Starmer, have painted an image of an individual more interested in tightening her own grip on one of the UK's largest trade unions than of serving its members. Now, I know some reading this will be shaking their heads in vehement disagreement with me right now. So let's take a look at her tenure so far for a moment and see if that offers a clue as to why she and her allies, her own personal slate, flopped in these internal elections functionally. They didn't go quite the way they wanted to elect members of Unite's executive committee. Now, since becoming General Secretary of Unite, Graham has, despite claiming she wants to hold Keir Starmer's Labour to account, has kept on funding him massively. She's gone from promising to keep funding under review to suddenly saying he has workers' best interests at heart, which, given he refuses to attend pickets and condemns those going on strike far more than he ever offers them support, to the point he's even sacked a front bencher for daring to stand in solidarity with striking workers. It's a little bit rich coming from Sharon Graham, this line, this narrative. Where is the evidence? £1 million a year Unite give to Labour, led by a man who won't stand in solidarity with workers on strike, won't stand in solidarity with trade unionists. Why are you paying him and his party anything at this point? It's not even just a lack of solidarity with Starmer either, though. There's been round and round of redundancies in Labour under his leadership. He's engaged in fire and rehire. He has forced people into signing non-disclosure agreements and opposed industrial action taken in the interests of welfare and safety by emergency staff like our nurses and public sector workers such as teachers. What has Sharon Graham said to all of that? Oh, Keir, yes, first name terms, Keir must be bolder, she said. She might want to take her own advice there, frankly, with her attitudes towards Labour and Keir Starmer. But Starmer aside, she's got a reputation for trying to rid herself of inconvenient officers in senior posts. One example was demoting of Brendan Ogle after he took long-term sick leave due to a battle with cancer. But instead of supporting his return to his role within Unite, Graham wanted him demoted and moved 100 miles away from his base and position in Dublin as Ireland's most senior Unite officer. Branches across Ireland wrote to her in uproar. The energy branch in Ireland even threatened disaffiliation from the union. Such was the fallout from her actions. You didn't hear much about this in the news, though, did you? She then cancelled a trip she had planned to the Emerald Isle, running away from the fury she had just called down on herself. She's also tried claiming credit for stuff she had nothing to do with. The number of successful union results for workers that have happened due to the excellent work of others within the union always seem to get overshadowed by Graham, who always has to publish a statement about that success, always complete with a large picture of herself, making her comment and turning every victory for ordinary workers, it seems, into a campaign piece for herself. She even at one point tried claiming credit for something done by her predecessor, Len McCluskey, regarding increasing strike funds. She was soon called out for that too, not least by Len himself. She employs her husband. That always raises eyebrows when politicians do it, when they give their families a job. But why should it be different regarding trade unionists? And why have you not heard more about that? Her husband, a chap called Jack Clark, was appointed to head of bargaining dispute support and was done without the normal procedure of being signed off by Unite's National Executive Committee. So you can kind of see why she'd be very interested in stacking the executive in her favour. No transparency, lack of due diligence, not the usual procedure, and you can only wonder why this should be such an issue. But one very big reason might be the string of allegations for harassment and bullying that had been made against Clark, allegedly, even including threats of violence to the point he was on a final warning prior to Sharon Graham taking over. These were all allegations put to Unite by Squawk Box, independent investigative journalism at its finest, and all Squawk Box got was abuse from Unite's press office. How professional of them is that, whilst repeatedly denying knowledge of any bullying allegations or indeed knowledge of any evidence taken proving it? A simple yes or no would have done, but that didn't happen, did it? So hardly honesty and integrity on show here, is there? Now, I was never a backer of Sharon Graham. Many familiar with Unite, familiar with me, will know that. But I am a Unite member, and I want the Unite Union to be a great fighting union that puts members' interests first. And even though she won the General Secretary election, many good things had been said about her, and I wanted to see that play out, see it come into play, yet her track record since becoming General Secretary has been, in my opinion, a poor one. It's not just people like me who never backed her carping about that either. One of her biggest backers at the time were the AWL, the Alliance for Workers' Liberty, and they have since turned their backs on her too because of her record, particularly her record of cozying up, as she seems to do these days, to Keir Starmer. All that disappointment hasn't ended at the aforementioned incidences either, but only seems to ramp up heading into these elections. Her candidates had to be loyal to her, had to be solid, had to help her gain greater control over the structures of the union, to which end eligibility criteria for candidates went out the window. At least one candidate was found to be ineligible to stand because of Unite's Rule 6, which states that in order to be eligible to be a candidate for election to the Executive Council, what these elections were all about, the member in question must be an accountable representative of workers. In other words, all candidates must be workplace representatives. One candidate down here in the Southwest was found to be neither a rep nor a branch office holder, and therefore they didn't qualify under Unite's own rules. Yet this was ignored. She was allowed to stand. She went on the ballot. Annoyingly, she got elected to this executive too. This ought to be challenged, I think. It's not right. Two other pro-Graham candidates were found to have committed racial slurs. One guy appeared in a dinghy with a caricature of what was perceived to be Shamima Begum, invoking accusations of anti-immigrant sentiment and Islamophobia. Graham denied she knew him, yet he used a picture of himself with her in his campaign materials. He was going for the LGBT plus position too, an equalities position. He didn't get it, thankfully. Another pro-Graham candidate made slurs up against the Irish, slurs which Unite accepted were racist, yet he remained on the slate and on the ballot, and he's also been elected to the Unite NEC. Well, I thought you said this was bad for Sharon Graham. Well, one reason Sharon got some of her people through is the sheer amount of Unite money thrown at her campaign, not least a dark money campaign that seemed to be running on Facebook. Facebook ads promoting Graham's slated candidates from an anonymous page just titled Executive Council Elections. Nothing to do with Unite, no mention of Sharon Graham herself whatsoever. But funding this way is not transparent. Who knows what was spent, how much was spent? It's completely unaccountable. However, this was not overall an election which was gone Sharon Graham's way. As I said at the start, with all of this to fall back on, it's little wonder she's upset and cheesed off members all over the place. Overall, the elections have been described as a mixed bag, with Sharon Graham losing some of her biggest and most influential supporters, where she has gone above and beyond to strengthen her hand, seemingly well beyond, on Unite's NEC. She is now weaker than she was before, with more independent, slateless candidates getting elected, along with proper left-wingers from the likes of the United Left's members' first slate and the progressive Unite Left Scotland slate doing very well too. A mixed NEC is one that is more likely to work in the interests of members. There's a lot more having to work together needed to get anything through. A lot more collaboration is required. That's the word, collaboration. Denying Sharon Graham the executive power she craved, therefore, can only be a good thing for members, because her record in charge so far shows she needs holding to account more, not less. And when we should be fighting for the rights of ordinary working class people, having a general secretary more fixated on entrenching herself in power, as she seems to be to me, cannot ever be a good thing. And that's going to hold the union back. Unite has its own Keir Starmer, in Sharon Graham. I don't think that's a horrible or dishonest comparison to make at this point. And one of those Keir Starmers is one too many as it is. Thanks for watching. If you appreciated this video, please do hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment and hit the notification bell too so you don't miss the next one. Also, look out for me on social media and other interesting stuff by clicking on the Linktree link in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Cheers, folks.